All these things you have to consider, and whatever particular drug combination you end up at, that's completely individualized for you as a person, but doesn't give you the right to be dogmatic that this is the way and this is the only way. Vigorous Steve here. Let's discuss individual risk assessment and individual risk management when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs and the ancillary medications which usually come along with performance-enhancing drugs. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of dogmatic stuff in the fitness industry, and whether that's general population bro science lore or based on individual experience or experience with clients, for example, or based purely in science, and that will be the science of today, not the science a month from now or a year from now. I mean, we always got to keep in mind that science is always evolving, and what might be true today might not hold up tomorrow when there's another study performed that kind of debunks it or disproves it or optimizes and pushes the science to a new level. And then you make another decisions based on the science that came out recently, right? So I feel that it's always very important not to stay dogmatic, because in particular cases, things that are frowned upon might actually be very beneficial for an individual with a different risk to reward ratio, so to say. They might see a particular thing to be highly beneficial, and they clearly benefit from it. And the potential risks that come along with a particular practice or performance-enhancing drugs or ancillaries or supplementation or diet strategies or training strategies, right? Their individual risk to reward analysis based on what they're doing tells them that it's beneficial for them, and they're willing to forgo whatever potential side effects might occur if they even manifest to begin with, right? Because everybody responds differently. That's what you can usually tell from the insert of particular medications. You see that there's potential side effects, and then when you do the research, it might manifest in 1% of the individuals, or it might only manifest in 20% of the individuals up until a particular dose. So this all goes into your individual risk assessment to see which compounds you might add in could cause you potential side effects, and then you'll have to outweigh these potential side effects to the potential benefits that you can get from this particular compound. Now, I would never, personally, since I don't experience hair loss and I always feel a little bit inclined to go bald. I enjoy being bald, or at least have a trimmed hairline. So I would never consider finasteride to preserve my hair, because I'm willing to forego my hair for the risk to have libido's issue further down the line. I would not be able, or I would not be willing to undergo that risk, for example. But there are plenty of people who do. There are plenty of people who do. Their hairline is more important to them compared to the potential negative effects on their libido, right? And we can't pass judgments on that because everybody's different. Everybody has a different risk to a reward ratio. And again, in some people, or in a lot of people, these sex drive issues don't manifest. They might get other side effects from a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, or they get no side effects at all. And they take this compound, they did their risk to a reward analysis, and they only get benefits, right? They get to keep their hair, and their libido is not affected. Maybe their libido even goes up, because they're changing the ratio between testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, right? And for some people, that's beneficial. And we can also take myself for an example. I recently started a peptide called GHK-Copper. GHK stands for glycyl histidyl lysine, I believe, and then copper is attached. So you can buy that separately as a GHK or as GHK-Copper, which contains copper. Now, GHK-Copper is 18.7% copper. So if you use that at particular higher dosages, you can actually bring yourself over the tolerable reference range for copper intake on a daily basis if you run that compound every day, which then compounds with the dietary copper that you're consuming. So in my case, I started GHK-Copper for a little bit of a skin tightening effect to see how much of an effect it would have on collagen synthesis, to see if my skin texture would improve, if my skin would retract, become a little bit more tighter, if it would help with connective tissue, and if it could somehow remove the gray hairs that are slowly creeping up. Luckily for me, I have a way to hide it. They're all growing here. So that's another reason to trim that all off. But I have some gray hairs in my eyebrows lately. So decided to run GHK-Copper in an attempt to see if it can give me some anti-aging benefits regarding skin texture and gray hair. Now, this is a peptide that you run for months, maybe indefinitely if it works, right? So far, I only noticed a skin tightening effect. I don't have any joint issues, which I did have a couple weeks before, so that's a noticeable benefit. I started low, 1 milligram GHK-Copper per day, gave that 2 weeks, see if it affected my blood work, if I get any adverse reactions, because you see, when you do the research, you might get nausea, dizziness, but the most predominant side effect that I'm experiencing is a financial drain. It's not that expensive, to be honest, but the most predominant side effect that I'm experiencing is a post-injection pain, which is what everybody reports with GHK-Copper, but it's tolerable, right? So I did 1 milligram for a while, then I increased to 2 milligrams, and then I increased to 5 milligrams. Now, where my individual risk to reward analysis comes into play is regarding copper toxicity, because the upper tolerable limit of copper intake for men is 10 milligrams per day. I believe that the daily recommended intake is 900 micrograms. So I'm meeting all of that through health supplementation or my diet. I get about 3, sometimes 4 milligrams of copper in per day. That leaves me 6 milligrams of copper before I reach the upper tolerable limit. And over prolonged periods of time, that might result in copper toxicity, which I'm not willing to subject myself to. So I had to do a little bit of analysis. How much copper does copper GHQ actually contain? And I had to do my own calculation based on the molecular weight, because nobody ever mentions how much copper is actually present within GHK-Copper. So I measured the molecular weight of copper against the entire peptide and came up with 18.7%. Now, based on my dietary intake being 3 to 4 milligrams of copper, I'm allowed an additional 6 milligrams of copper on top from an injectable source or supplementation or wherever I decide to get this additional copper from before I reach the upper tolerable limit of 10 milligrams per day. So I can have an additional 6 milligrams of copper. If I were to inject 32, 33 milligrams of GHK-Copper, I would reach 6 milligrams of copper per day. Now, that's a very high dose, obviously. I have no intention to run 32, 33 milligrams of GHK-Copper. But based on my individual risk assessment and risk management, the risk to reward, I wanted to see what the upper threshold was going to be. Now, I'm going to increase it to maybe 10 milligrams of GHK-Copper. For my own well-being, I know that I will never reach a copper intake that's close to the upper tolerable limit of copper, considering that I'm going to run this peptide for maybe 3 months, 6 months to really give it adequate time for it to help with skin anti-aging and perhaps take care of some of the gray hairs which are manifesting. So, right, this is my individual risk to reward, and I'm willing to subject myself to the post-injection pain and none of the other side effects manifested at a lower dose of 1 milligram than 2 milligrams than 5 milligrams. And maybe in the future, I will go up to 10 milligrams, right? Until I found the sweet spot where particular beneficial effects start to manifest at an accelerated rate. Another experiment which I ran recently was with a peptide called Kisspeptin-10. I wanted to see if Kisspeptin-10 was sufficient to improve hypothalamic pituitary testes axis functioning before I reintroduce testosterone and perhaps other anabolic androgenic steroids in the future, right? I'm still waiting for a cardiac ultrasound and perhaps cardiac MRI or a CT scan that will take place on July the 1st. I will make a video about that when I get the results, and that kind of determines for my own risk analysis assessment going forward if anabolic androgenic steroids are even in the cards for me. I just want to have a green light from a cardiologist that my heart is functioning correctly, there's no issues, and that will play into my decision-making process going forward regarding performance-enhancing drugs. I understand that GHK-Copper and Kisspeptin-10 are also on the category of performance-enhancing drugs, but I was not able to find any evidence that they can contribute to coronary artery disease, plaque buildup, right? That kind of stuff. And unfortunately, steroids have been associated with that, so I'm just waiting for the green light. Now, in the meantime, I did still some experiments. One of them was with the GHK-Copper. One of them was with Kisspeptin-10. I did a lot of research. I saw that there's evidence to support that Kisspeptin-10 can improve HPTA functioning by raising luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone concentrations. I've even seen that on blood work on some of the consultation clients, which were following traditional hormone replacement and used Kisspeptin-10 under doctor supervision where it was prescribed for them, where luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone were in range, albeit at the bottom of the reference range. But hey, the luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone of 1 to 2 milli-IUs per liter, or IUs per liter, depending on how they mention that in a reference range, it's in range, right? And it's an LH and FSH that is in range continuously is certainly more beneficial than supplementing with ACG or exogenous HMG, which is considerably more expensive than Kisspeptin-10. Now, the people that I had a consultation with, they ran 100 micrograms Kisspeptin-10 3 times per week. So I wanted to make sure that that was going to work for me. I have all my baseline blood work. I'm not on exogenous steroids, right? I have nothing to impair my HPTA. I'm going to run an experiment with Kisspeptin-10 to see if follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone levels will increase. After 2 weeks on 100 micrograms Kisspeptin-10 3 times per week, they did not increase. I did my blood work before and after. I checked my testosterone, my estrogen, my sex. I did the entire hormone panel. Nothing changed. Very comparable. I cannot say that 100 micrograms of Kisspeptin-10 had 3 times per week had an effect on my hypothalamic pituitary functioning, right? Because LH and FSH and testosterone were comparable. So I increased to 100 micrograms Kisspeptin-10 every day, ran that experiment for another 2 weeks, and see if there was any changes. Again, no changes. Testosterone, luteinizing hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone, all very comparable. This time I even injected 100 micrograms Kisspeptin-10 30 minutes before drawing blood, because that's pretty much the window in which most of the studies have been performed. And the problem is with the effective dose, which was investigated with Kisspeptin-10, they administered 20 micrograms every 2 hours. Which, let's be honest, is incredibly cumbersome. I can't remember if that was intravenous, subcutaneous, or intramuscularly. But the dosing protocol for Kisspeptin-10, which was shown to be efficacious, was 20 micrograms every 2 hours, which is difficult. Obviously, you would need to have some sort of infusion pump, which are available for gonadorelin or buserelin, I believe, in cases of a medical setting. Right, you're in the hospital, they have an infusion pump, and it will infuse 15, 10 micrograms, 20 micrograms of a gonadotropin-releasing hormone or an analog of a gonadotropin hormone-releasing hormone. So in those settings, it's been shown to work. But in my settings, a subcutaneous administration of Kisspeptin-10, 100 micrograms every day, no effect, right? But again, I don't have that negative feedback of the hypothalamic pituitary testis axis because I'm not on steroids. So now I'll have to retest it again to see if this Kisspeptin-10 protocol is able to sustain LH and FSH concentrations going forward for the day comes when I'm back on exogenous hormones. I read a couple people talk about very high dosages of Kisspeptin-10, 500 micrograms, 1,000 micrograms subcutaneous 3 times per week. And I'm not willing to expose myself to that just for the sake of experimentation to see if that works. But other people did. And they said they noticed the benefits. I didn't see their blood work, but the anecdotal evidence says that there's some benefit to increase the Kisspeptin-10 to a pretty high dose. I'm not willing to undergo that experiment, but other people did, and they have good results. I'm not going to hate them for it because clearly the benefit is there. And we can do this in a setting for all the other compounds as well. And then there's Trenbolone, which from my personal experience and all the research that I've done, I would not say that it's a suitable compound, right? Unless it's in a contest prep where there's actually something to win. And then the risk to reward analysis the parameters change a little bit. I have this that I want to accomplish. And these are all the potential side effects, whether that's short-term or long-term, that I'm willing to subject myself to because I might not win without the Trenbolone sandwich, because I compete at a level where the Trenbolone sandwich is required. Now, in my case, I'm not competing, so the Trenbolone sandwich is not required. I made a deal with my wife. She said my mood was intolerable. So that was it, right? No more Tren for me. And now all the research that I've done, over the last couple of years, trying to figure out a way where tren you can somehow use it safely with minimal side effects. With my analysis, I would say that Trenbolone is definitely not safe, but there might be cases in which Trenbolone might be beneficial, right? And that's usually in the case of a contest prep or during a stage of the off season where the bodybuilder is incredibly developed. Most people will not reach that point where Trenbolone is actually required in the off season. There's many other compounds that they can choose from before they actually need to resort to the Trenbolone sandwich. Now, that's my analysis and my experience with Trenbolone, right? I still recommend Trenbolone to clients when they're competing. And then we try to do that in a lowest effective dose scenario. But there are guys out there that know all the risks to reward or all the risks and the negative side effects of Trenbolone, and they run 1,000 milligrams of Tren per week, and they have no real side effects, right? No short-term side effects. They can tolerate it. Their mood is not affected. They feel great, and they put all the Trenbolone to work. They train insane with that Tren in their system, and they get great results. Now, I would ask them to please stop, don't take it, based on what I've researched, right? Based on my individual risk to reward assessment. But I'm not them, and they have to do that for themselves. And again, if the results are there, I'm in no position to tell them to stop taking Tren, because they're clearly winning. They clearly look phenomenal. They're clearly putting this Trenbolone to work, and they're not a asshole to anybody in their surroundings, right? They don't have these immediate anger management issues by going on Trenbolone, or they don't have any of the night sweats or the snoring or the Tren cough, right? They don't experience the side effects that I was experiencing. So those people, they can take Trenbolone. I can take Trenbolone. Maybe the next guy can't take Trenbolone, but we still got to respect this guy for taking Trenbolone, not experiencing any of the side effects, and somehow tolerate up to 1,000 milligrams per week for several weeks on end, leading into a contest. So, right, that's their individual risk to reward analysis. And now you see that everybody is kind of different. Everybody has a different response. Everybody looks at these compounds differently, whether that's from risk to reward or how they are experiencing side effects, if they even experience side effects at all. Because individual response is so different across the board. And then you also have to factor in all the tremendous drug combinations that we subject ourselves to. Like these particular drug combinations might work for a particular individual, might not work for another individual, but if they make one change, it might still work, right? Or maybe they need to make 3 changes and it still works. Now the cocktails are a little bit different, but still similar, right? This is completely individualized. And this is completely individualized. This guy might have completely different risk to reward analysis compared to the next guy, but the results might be the same. Or, right, this guy's risk to reward profile is so low that he's only willing to subject himself to ashwagandha root extract. That's the only performance enhancing drug to raise, well, it's not really a drug, it's a supplement, but something to boost testosterone concentrations a little bit. And the next guy is willing to take 4 grams of gear, right? Because he's competing and he feels that he needs it, or he actually needs it because at 3.5 grams he was competing and he got second, and 4 grams of gear he got first. You have to put it that simple, right? Of course, competing is way more complicated. I just want to make it simple for this explanation, right? And you can do the same risk to reward for every compound that we take in bodybuilding or fitness. And every compound in combination with another compound, right? Particular PEDs in combination with a particular ancillary medication. Because there's so much overlap that a lot of people overlook. Really, there's so much overlap, guys. There's so much overlap. You're on a particular cocktail, you add in one compound, and you mess up that entire cocktail. And now you get side effects that you did not expect. Through all your research, you get side effects that you did not anticipate. And now you have to completely overhaul what you were doing previously, because you have another compound that you want to add on top for particular benefits. But it might mean that you can't run anything that you were running previously. So you see how complicated it gets, right? And so let's just make it simple to finish off this video before I start rambling and go down the rabbit hole. Individual response and individual risk assessment. Those two go hand in hand for you as an individual to decide what you're willing to subject yourself to, right? And then as you slowly transition and go about your bodybuilding or fitness journey, you kind of optimize everything for yourself based on your individual response. And unfortunately, all the research that you can do, whether that's on PubMed, Google Scholar, whatever science avenue you find, whoever you talk to, whatever bro science you read about, you will not know how your body responds until you run the experiment. In which case, what I always preach, the lowest effective dose you can always increase. Increase to a point where you get intolerable side effects, right? And then you lower the dose to a previous increment where you get more effects than side effects, right? And that plays into your individual risk assessment. I'm willing to tolerate 250 milligrams a test. 375 milligrams a test gives me too much estrogen. I don't want an aromatase inhibitor. I'm going to drop the test at 250 and perhaps add in a Trenbolone to act as a steroidal, reversely binding aromatase inhibitor, right? Trenbolone temporarily inhibits the aromatase enzyme and prevents testosterone from converting into estradiol. That's how you slowly design your cycle over time. Hopefully you don't get terrible hematocrit from that combination. Maybe you did not anticipate that. Maybe it will manifest. That plays into your risk management as well. All these things you have to consider, and whatever particular drug combination you end up at, that's completely individualized for you as a person, but doesn't give you the right to be dogmatic that this is the way and this is the only way. Really, it works for you and perhaps not for somebody else. You can extrapolate that to clients or give advice in the context that it worked for you based on your own individual genetic makeup. But again, the person on the other end who is listening to that, you have to make an assessment regarding your own analysis, whether that particular protocol or particular practices, whether they sound dogmatic or not, are going to be beneficial for you as an individual. And then as you progress through the compounds, you get some experience. You have a short list of compounds that you liked, that worked well for you, don't cause any side effects. The evidence is there to support that they are efficacious up until particular dosages and safe up until particular dosages because they've been studied, right? Not in animals, but in humans. They're perhaps still prescribed or whatever rule you give yourself that plays into your own risk assessment. That will be your little selection of pharmaceuticals that you're willing to run. And that ultimately is the end of your risk assessment and risk management practices. Man, I hope it wasn't too long, this video. Again, I'm just giving you this for food for thought, so you have something to think about before you read up about all the side effects and all the benefits and then decide to experiment. You as an individual has to decide what to subject yourself to. Nobody else can make that decision for you. That's 100% up to you. Your body, your responsibility. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find the ebooks on my website, vigoroussteve.com/shop. Follow me on Instagram at vigoroussteve. I have a link tree now. You can find it in my bio. A lot of links there to companies that I endorse and where you can find the ebooks directly, right? So you don't have to type it into Google. You can just click the links in the link tree and they will take you to the appropriate place. If you're looking for personalized advice, consultations are always available. You can find the consultations in the consultation section. Use the link tree to get yourself there. There is now a Reddit for Vigorous Steve. I'll link that down below in this video. I have not talked with the guy that opened up the Reddit, but thank you so much. And I'm very late by doing this myself, so somebody else already jumped the gun. There's now a Vigorous Steve subreddit. I might pop in once in a while, so feel free to join. And then I also have a Podbean and a Spotify, and I'm going to be on Apple Podcasts soon. Those links will all be in my link tree as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.